Welcome back, everybody. This is a Kaz Aggression deck walkthrough. The intent of this video is whether you are a new player or an older player, to get an idea on the basics of Kaz Red, my thoughts on it, my versions of it, and then allow you guys to take what I've made and run with it and make it your own. So whether you are a new player or an experienced player, I hope you find something useful and insightful in this video. So the format of this video I'm going to post on screen now. Feel free to jump ahead if you're only interested in a very specific part of the deck guide. Now, let's get into the guide itself. I think the best place to start is with the leader himself, Kaz. So, what is Kaz? So, Kaz is a 4-resource deploy leader, which is pretty powerful in this game. Coming out early on 4 resources means you can get your tempo, you can get ahead early, and it forces your opponent to have to catch up to you. Now, Kaz's action ability is really interesting because it allows him to take essentially 2 actions in his turn. The first action is always causing a friendly unit to lose all abilities, and they can't gain new abilities. The devs confirmed that if you lose all abilities, you can't gain new abilities later on that round, which is really powerful, and we will talk about that. But then you also get to take an extra action. So it's essentially a free action to blank a unit, which is pretty insane, and we'll talk about that again more later. But just know that it's 2 actions in one. When you deploy Kaz, instead of it being an exhaust action, it's an on-attack ability. And it's an on-attack ability both as a unit and attached as a pilot. His unit stats are identical to Sabine. It's a 2/5, but Sabine has the 1 damage to the opponent's base, where Kaz doesn't have that. So it's technically like a 1 damage loss, but that's okay. And Kaz also gets a +3/+3 when deployed as an upgrade, which is very close to a Sabine Darksaber. Instead of always having Sabine and drawing Darksaber, hopefully, you're actually doing it in reverse. You just need a readied unit, and you always have Kaz. So it's actually a little bit more reliable than Sabine Darksaber. So why play Kaz? Well, let's look at cards in his color. Set 1 Millennium Falcon, you don't have to pay the tax anymore. Han kind of pays his tax by playing a card from hand as a resource, and then it destroys that resource at the end of the phase. We kind of get it for free. We don't even need to lose the card from hand. Fireball, which is Kaz's ship. When the regroup phase starts, you don't have to deal 1 damage to itself. Pretty powerful. A 3/3 ambush on turn 1 is insane, and if we negate the downside, it's really good. Stolen AT Hauler. A 4/5 in space on turn 2 is extremely good, and we get to negate the really bad downside of it. So we get that for free. Contracted Hunter, which is also, when the regroup phase starts, you defeat it, so you can blank it with Kaz, and now you have a 4/4 ambush for 3. And Cartel Turncoat. It's a 1-cost 2/3 with a bounty, so you just blank the bounty, and then you have a 1-cost 2/3, which is also really strong. You essentially get 5 cards in Kaz's own color that are really good. And in fact, I actually don't use Contracted Hunter in any of my deck builds. You might be asking yourself, why are we in red? And that's a good question. Kaz Cunning actually looks really powerful because you get all the double yellow cards, you get Cunning, and it's really good. Well, we have 3 specific reasons that we are in red. Reason number 1 is Heroic Sacrifice. You can basically blank a unit with Kaz, and then play Heroic Sacrifice to attack with a unit and draw a card. And since the unit is blanked, you actually don't do the when this unit deals combat damage. Also with Heroic Sacrifice, if Kaz is deployed on a unit, and you use Heroic Sacrifice on the unit Kaz is deployed on, since when this unit deals combat damage comes after on attack abilities, it actually completely removes that from the text. So you don't have to worry about Heroic Sacrificing the unit Kaz is on. And you basically get a +2/+0 and a draw a card, which is really good in this deck. Next, we're going to use Trench Run. You get to attack with a fighter. It gets +4/+0, but it has an on-attack ability that makes it kind of a risk because you could kill your own unit before it deals damage. With Kaz, if you use his leader side to blank a unit, then play Trench Run as your next action, you get to deal the 4 damage with a fighter and not do the on-attack ability. Now, differently than Heroic Sacrifice, the on-attack abilities both will go off. They'll both trigger. Even if you choose Kaz's on-attack ability first when he's deployed as a unit, Trench Run's ability is still triggered, and you can't blank an already triggered ability, so you still will have to perform Trench Run's on-attack ability. And lastly, another reason why we're in red is they hate that ship. Your opponent creates 2 TIE Fighter tokens, and they come in ready, which isn't that great. But you get to cheat out a vehicle from your hand, and it costs 3 less. So essentially, you get a 2 resource discount on a unit in hand. These 3 cards are pretty powerful. So this deck has different strengths and weaknesses than the other Kaz decks. I think of this Kaz deck as essentially you're putting together two separate packages, and then you're throwing in some extra good stuff on top. So the first package is the fighter package. And what is the fighter package? We're essentially taking 3 of the cards that work exceptionally well in Kaz. That's Cartel Turncoat, that's Fireball, and that's Trench Run. And then we're adding in about 6 to 7 other cards that help this package out. I recommend running Red 5. It's just a 3/4 fighter with an on-attack ability that might not go off that often, but a 3/4 fighter is just really good. And then I like to supplement my turn 1 plays with about 3 to 4 extra fighters. The best fighters that I would recommend are Black 1 and Anakin's Interceptor. And the reason why is these are 2/3 turn 1 plays. Their upside is kind of conditional, and they're not like the reason why these cards are good. I'll talk more about this later in the card trap section, but you want cards that their upside is still there and relevant, but if they get blanked, they don't completely destroy the card. The second package is the They Hate That Ship package. This consists of They Hate That Ship, Home 1, and either Rebellious Hammerhead, Guerrilla Attack Pod, and War Juggernaut. These cards can come in and have a big effect on the game. Home 1 ambushes and kills a space unit. Rebellious Hammerhead actually is a really good ship because it can come in, at worst, kill one of the TIE fighters that you gave your opponent. And War Juggernaut does that on steroids. You play War Juggernaut, it can hit the whole board. You don't get the downside of the 2 TIE fighters. It can even damage itself, and it comes in as a 4/6. You can pilot it with Kaz, and on your next turn, you have a 7/9 leader, which is insane on the 5 resource turn. Insane. We want to get so far ahead, we leave our opponent in the dust as they catch up to us, and once they finally would get ahead of us, they'll be dead. If they just squeeze out that they survived, we also have more They Hate That ships. We can try and give one final push to actually finish the deal. Also, with They Hate That ship, and why it is especially powerful in this deck, is we run a lot of 3-cost cards. And they don't all have to be vehicles. You can play a 3-cost card first, and then play They Hate That ship to play a 3-cost vehicle on Kaz's flip turn. And you can still get 6 resources worth of cards on the 4 resource turn, as well as flipping a leader. So you get so much tempo and such a big power spike on this one turn with this package. And we'll get more into the play lines later. The core of the deck turns into the fighter package. They Hate That ship package. And then you have extra cards that come into the core deck. It's not just those 2 packages. I put in things like Set 1 Falcon, AT Hauler, Heroic Sacrifice, and actually the Set 4 Han Solo unit. This is essentially a DL-44 blaster for vehicles. We can't smuggle it, but we get the effect of a 4/5 ground unit with ambush if we need it. We're mainly trying to use it for a DL-44 blaster in space. That leaves us at about 33-ish cards. And we're running Thermal Oscillator. I will talk about that more later. That leaves us around 12 cards to play around with. So the cards that I chose to include are Cassian from set 2. It's 3 damage in the pocket, plus Smuggle is really nice in this deck. One of the downsides about Kaz Red, we run out of cards really fast. We're playing really low to the ground. If we get a They Hate That ship off, we're playing 2 cards on 1 action. So you're playing They Hate That ship and another card in hand. You do lose card advantage. Heroic Sacrifice does try to help make up for it, but having some Smuggle cards so we can kind of play from the resources is pretty good. I've included a couple of the set 4 Falcons. They're transports, which isn't the best for Trench Run, but a 3/4 space unit is good. It has some synergy with the couple of the pilots I'm playing. So it's not the worst target in the world. And I've included Spare the Target. This is mainly for Piet. If they try and play the new Fleet Interdictor unit on his flip turn, you just send that back to hand, you push all your damage through. Yes, it might come back on the next turn, but hopefully you might even have home 1 that you can play and run into it, and then you have a home 1 that's alive, and they basically lost 2 turns worth of value, and it's probably game over from there. After I put in all these cards, I noticed the majority of my deck is heroism. I initially included War Juggernauts and the AT Hauler. So that's essentially 6 out of my 45 cards are not heroism. But I felt like maybe Rebellious Hammerhead is similar, not as great, probably, but similar to War Juggernaut. And if we have the majority of heroism units, why don't we make this a For a Cause I Believe In deck? So I added 3 For a Cause I Believe Ins. This gives us some burn damage. This lets us try and close out a couple games that we may have lost without it. So some of the notable play lines, and a lot of them do kind of revolve around they hate that ship. If your opponent has 1 space unit played against you on the 4 resource turn, you can play they hate that ship, bring in home 1, ambush their space unit. Now they just have 2 TIE fighters. Another really good and powerful they hate that ship play is any 2/3 drops. You can even play For a Cause I Believe In, and then they hate that ship in, like set 1 Falcon, pilot set 1 Falcon, and attack with it for 6 damage. Plus, hopefully, you got 4 damage off of For a Cause I Believe In. So that's a 10 damage turn on your flip turn, and you have a leader and possibly another ship out, which is threatening. Another kind of sneaky play line, it's not the best. You can actually get pretty far ahead by doing this. Playing Cartel Turncoat and then they hate that ship to bring in another 3 cost unit on your first turn. So you could have a 2/3 and a 3/4 on turn 1. That's a sneaky strong play. You get obviously the heroic sack buffs and the trench run buffs. There's a couple other play lines that you'll have to figure out. Those are essentially a lot of the main combos that we're looking to do with this deck. Kaz's flip turn. One thing I want to tell you is we are playing a lot of risky cards. And by risky, I mean they're cards with a downside. If your opponent ever kills an AT hauler that didn't get blanked, well, you're in for a bad time because now they have a free 4/5 that you're going to have to take care of. On Kaz's flip turn, if you want to flip Kaz onto an AT hauler, don't just flip him onto it, because then if he gets exhausted, you can't do any of the blanking that turn. So you can actually use Kaz's leader ability to negate all the effects on a unit, and then as the free action, deploy Kaz out. Sometimes it's the right move not to get the damage in with Kaz. And what I mean by that is, if your opponent is playing exhaust effects, if your opponent is playing Power of the Dark Sides or something, if you think your opponent is going to kill your unit, get the damage in. Getting damage in early with units on board is better than trying to get greedy and flip Kaz onto it and attack with it. If you sneak in 2 or 3 damage, and then your opponent kills that unit, most likely they spent their turn killing it. Then you get to do your really special plays. Hopefully you have they hate that ship in hand, play either 2/3 costs, pilot them with Kaz, or you bring in one of your big 6 cost vehicles and pilot that with Kaz. I know that we think like these big leaders can kind of get removed somewhat easily. You know, a 10/9 Kaz home 1 is something extremely difficult to get rid of on turn 4. And then on your next turn, you can swing in with 10. If you have heroic sacrifice, you can swing in with 12. Then you can start getting wide again while they attack into the big Kaz leader that you have. If you have set 1 Falcon in hand, you can always attack with your board first and then play the Falcon behind it and flip Kaz onto that Falcon. You get your on-board damage in first, and then once hopefully they've exhausted all their resources, and you can get a surefire 6 damage in, leaving behind a 6/7 ship. Your next question might be, why are we using Thermal Oscillator, and is the downside of the minus HP on Thermal Oscillator better than just having 30 HP? How is it helping us? One of the issues with set 4 bases is the effect it's going to have on your games isn't readily apparent. You know, with Energy Conversion Lab or Tarkin Town, you know, I'm Energy Conversion Labbing out Wrecker and I see this big effect happen. Or I'm Tarkin Towning my opponent's turn 1 play and I understand that I'm far ahead. With these new bases, it's all about probability and statistics and the amount of times you're going to be playing your games and how often you see your good cards. I ran the statistics myself. One of the scenarios I looked at was in my opening hand, I want to see they hate that ship and then one of my big heavy hitter vehicles to go with it, like Home 1 or War Juggernaut. And between a 30 HP base and Thermal Oscillator, if I mulligan, I have about a 5% increased chance of seeing that combo in my opening hand than if I used a 30 HP base. And there are some other things, like every single card that you're going to see in your hand is more likely to appear, and you only get to include better cards. You don't have to include 5 worse cards in your main deck. To me, that is worth the 3 HP penalty that Thermal Oscillator is giving me. If you don't feel like Thermal Oscillator is good for you, don't feel the need to run it. You are not doing anything wrong by running a 30 HP base, or even the deploy a leader, draw a card base. We're trying to find combo pieces. We're trying to find pumps. If you want to run that base, please feel free to run it. I know I've been talking through all the cards and I've kind of listed them out in chunks. Here is the deck list that I put together for my 4 Kaz deck that I've been running, and I have been really enjoying it. But you might be saying to yourself, there's some really strong cards that aren't heroism. As you can see, I'm running Rebellious Hammerhead and not War Juggernaut. War Juggernaut, I do think probably performs better than Rebellious Hammerhead. So I put together a non-4 Kaz version. I basically removed the set 4 Falcons and replaced them with disabling Fang Fighters. This gives us some anti-pilot stuff, as well as adding in more fighters, which is good because we're playing Trench Run. I replaced Rebellious Hammerhead with War Juggernaut because War Juggernaut completely eliminates the downside of 4 Kaz, while also kind of being this massive threat in the arena we're not present in. So it's a change of pace, it's a curveball, and it lessens the downside of our main Haymaker. I replaced the Spare the Targets with Waylays. Waylay allows us to waylay our own stuff back. Feel like AT Hauler's gonna die, we can bring it back to our hand so that way our opponent doesn't get it for free. It's just not heroism, so I wasn't running it in my 4 Kaz deck. I've also taken out 4 Kaz I believe in, so we can add in a couple other cards. And I actually think adding in 2 Jam Communications is pretty strong. You get to remove things like Triple Dark Raid. You can try and Jam Communication resupply out of a Piet deck. Jam is really, really strong, and it's only 1 resource, so we can still like slide it in whenever we play our 3-drop and a 1-cost card on our leader flip turn. Okay, so those are the decks that I built. And I fully expect you guys to take my decks, tweak them to fit your playstyle. I don't expect you to agree with every decision I made. Each of us like our own wrinkles. We like our own cards. Please feel free to experiment. But I want to talk about cards that you need to be careful of because they're going to trick you. Cards like Green Squadron A-Wing,
It's a trap!
Sabine's Masterpiece,
It's a trap!
and Red Squadron Y-Wing.
It's a trap!
Okay, Akbar, calm down. Why am I saying that these cards will trick you? We're so used to running Green Squadron A-Wing. We kind of in our heads think of it as like, oh, it's a 3-attack turn 1 play. Except if you play cards like Heroic Sacrifice and you blank Green Squadron A-Wing and then you play Heroic Sacrifice on it, you actually kind of got a net 0 because you removed the raid 2 on Green Squadron A-Wing to play a +2/+0. So it still only attacks in for 3. And the draw effect of Heroic Sacrifice is negated because you used Heroic Sacrifice to draw a card. So you've essentially spent 1 resource to cycle a card off the top of your deck. Not that effective. Sabine's Masterpiece. You might think this is a really good card because we're playing red and yellow and exhausting and readying resources is good. Dealing extra damage will be good. Except again, if we decide that we need to play a buff spell on Sabine and we blank it, you don't get the extra effects, and it's a 3/3, which is a lot worse than a 3/4. Red Squadron Y-Wing also has the same kind of downside as Green Squadron A-Wing. If you want to put a buff on it and you blank it, you lose your indirect damage. That's also why we kind of can't play Rebels, is because a lot of these cards, somewhat anti-synergistic. I do have somewhat of a Rebel deck built. I will also include that as a 3rd deck in the description. I haven't played around with that much. It seems like it's too restrictive for me, and it's a little bit anti-synergistic between itself. So I talked about the cards that will trick you. What about some cards to consider? A combo that I don't know if I have space for it in the 45 card deck, but you might be able to fit it into a 50 card deck. And I'm about to make one of my friends extremely happy when he hears this. The combo of Dilapidated Ski Speeder and Biggs Darklighter. Dilapidated Ski Speeder is a 3-cost, which is already really good in this deck. A 3-cost 3/7, but it deals damage to itself. And it's a speeder. So if we play Biggs on it, we get Grit. On Kaz's flip turn, we can get Kaz and an 8/5 on the ground with Grit. It's pretty powerful. Another card I'd recommend is set for R2D2. I personally don't like it because I feel like we're already using a bunch of cards from hand, and wasting a card for just kind of like a +1/+1 to me doesn't feel that great because we're playing so many cards, our hand gets really, really tight. And I think I'd feel really, really bad if the card that I draw is a +1/+1 to a vehicle instead of like another vehicle that I can throw down to start putting pressure on. X-34 Landspeeder is another really good card I would recommend here. It's a 2-cost 2/3, so it's a turn 1 vehicle, and this allows you to also kind of throw a curveball at your opponent. if you play this out and it lives, you can actually deploy Kaz to the ground. And a lot of people aren't expecting that. This also is really good against Han Solo from set 1 because it's a 2-3 on the ground that whenever you pilot with Kaz, it's a 5-6 on the ground. 5 attack on the ground is really, really strong because if they try and tech DJ you, you have some ground presence to prevent it. This might come as a surprise to you as it became a surprise to me. Did you know that there is now a fighter ground unit? The Skyway Cloud Car is a ground unit and it is a fringe vehicle fighter. Why is that important? That allows us to play Trench Run on a ground unit. And Skyway Cloud Car is a 3-cost 3-3. When defeated, you may return a non-leader unit with 2 or less power to its owner's hand. So you can almost 2-for-1 an opponent, and it's a threat against Piet. If you have Skyway Cloud Car out and you trench run it, it can deal 7 damage to Piet and live. And if they take it out, you can actually return Piet unit back to its owner's hand. So Skyway Cloud Car is a really, really good option for these decks. Represents 7 damage on the ground to take out a bunch of 7 health leaders. There's even a chance that you get the bonus when defeated effect once you trench run it into the leader, suiciding into it, and then like bouncing another unit back. So 2-for-1ing your opponent with Skyway Cloud Car, it could actually be something to really look into here. These next 2 cards I'm recommending only because they're smuggle cards. And like I mentioned, one of the big downsides with this deck is you're going to be top decking a lot because you're playing so many cards from hand. It's Lando's Pride and Arm to the Teeth. I recommend Lando's Pride because it's a smuggle card and it's a 6-cost 5-5 ambush. It's not as great as Home 1, but you can still do the same thing where they hate that ship, Millennium Falcon Lando's Pride. It comes from hand, so it gets the ambush, and you can kill something on the same turn. But it also doubles as a smuggle ability. So if you already have your kind of smuggle plays figured out, if you don't have they hate that ship, you can resource Lando's Pride and still be able to play it later on. I also think Arm to the Teeth has some teeth in this deck. You're playing wide, and it's a smuggle card. So you can smuggle out Arm to the Teeth and start buffing stuff all over the place. And it's just it can kind of give you the same kind of feel of smuggling out an upgrade like DL44 Blaster. It's not as great, and it's probably not the best recommendation. But if you are struggling with keeping cards in hand, Arm to the Teeth is a good buff that we might want to look at as alleviate the card advantage issue that we see. Some notable issues that I've found currently with the deck. I think Han is a little bit rough of a matchup because he plays on the ground a lot, and we don't have a big ground presence, at least in how the deck is initially constructed. In order to start countering Hans, we might have to start playing Dilapidated Speeders and maybe Gorilla Attack Pod instead of Rebellious Hammerhead or something. Piet is also a tough matchup for this deck. Let's just hope that Piet gets eaten alive elsewhere. A few things we can do is, we can add Spark of Rebellions into the sideboard. We can add the 3rd copy of Spare the Target or Waylay. This way we can try and put Piet a little bit behind the 8 ball. That way they can't turn the corner on us. And we're going to run out of gas fast. Like I've said, we play so many cards from hand and we don't have that great of card draw. If we don't basically kill somebody on our first punch, we do have a couple tricks up our sleeve, especially in my For a Cause I Believe in deck. We have some burn damage in the back pocket, but running out of gas is one of the main issues. What I would like to say is sideboard and main deck according to what you expect and according to your own preferences and play styles. That's why I didn't really include a sideboard discussion. I feel like sideboarding is a little bit more personal on how you like to answer your local meta and what you're playing against. And I also want to highlight that if you're going to be testing now, pre-release and a little bit into release, testing is hard because 1, not all the cards are working right. If you're using Petronaki Arena, Karabast, or Force Table, all the cards haven't been implemented, all the cards don't have their full effect. And everyone is testing weird new stuff. So you're not really going up against the best of the best, what's happening. So just remember, we're all in the testing phase, we're all in the experimental phase. If something's not working now, it might work later, And if something is working now, it might not later. Take all your testing with a grain of salt and just have fun with the deck. With that, all my decks that I talked about will be in the description. I will also link the Petronaki Arena, to Karabast, to Force Table. Those are all testing sites that if you want to take these decks and play with them, feel free to go ahead. They're all free and open source. If you liked this video, please subscribe. Let me know if there's anything that you wish I would have included, anything that you liked, anything that you didn't like. I would like to start making more deck guides, and your feedback on what you like, what you don't like, what should change, what should stay is really important to me. So please let me know your thoughts below. And lastly, as always, thank you so much for watching and have a good day. See ya.
It's a trap!